Yeah, you may have seen in the news a few weeks ago that the South Korean president came on television out the blue and declared martial law, the abolition of democracy and martial law. And the whole Western world was like, oh my God, how can they do that? And then it turns out that they're actually, when they tried to arrest him, that these several thousand, I think yesterday it was something like 30,000 people gathered outside the court to protect him because I think they're ferociously anti-North Korea. They think he's a bastion of the old military who fought against North Korea. But what they did was then they stormed the courthouse and smashed up part of the building, and 90 people were arrested. And yet, on the Palestine demonstration, which was supposed to be a demonstration, after all, and I've been criticising this all along, that they've been organising demonstrations from A to B like the Grand Old Duke of York. And it wears people down, march them to the top of the hill, march them down again, always to listen to the same speakers. And I become very critical of that. Come to Hyde Park, march to the embassy, not to the embassy, but to nearby the embassy. And they've been ever so polite in agreeing to the terms. The police have said, do this, do that, don't do this, don't do that. And I don't think that, on the demonstrations, they were extremely rare to see any kind of arrest or violence or of any kind on these demonstrations. They've been exceptionally peaceful. In fact, so peaceful, you wonder what the hell they're doing. After all, thousands of people are killed, and then they're saying, and they march peacefully to listen to a few speakers once a month. Now, of course, there have been, and they're the same speakers, and there have been split-offs from that. At the beginning, in November 2022, was it 2022? 2023, sorry. We managed to organise one event where we got a lot of people up to speak, and that was a big thing to get people up to speak who were Palestinians who had suffered family losses and so on. Unfortunately, we haven't been able to. Oh, here's the man himself. We haven't been able to do that.
Comply. Do not comply.
The German
Well
think
done.
is to live. Well done, mate.
What time to get out?
9 a.m.
9 a.m. Well, let's let Piers get up first of all and have a little
Well,
speak.
wait a minute, I'll just put some stuff.
Oh, okay.
Oh, yeah, you put those famous bands out.
Okay. Oh, famous band are coming out. Oh no. So when exactly the time when Netanyahu claims to be making a deal made by Trump, apparently that's what they say. Trump pushed it through. Trump forced it through. Trump demanded peace. At exactly this time, the British police, this cannot have happened accidentally, that they suddenly took this hard line approach. You cannot march to the BBC because it's apparently near a synagogue. Actually, it's nowhere near a synagogue. The nearest synagogue is in Great Portland Street, which is half a mile away from where the demonstration was going to. And the demonstration was going to start at the BBC and march to Whitehall or something like that. And then, unfortunately, a mistake was made by Stop the War Coalition, who are prone to make these mistakes because they constantly think that they can make a deal with the police about the route of a demonstration. And then they expected the police would make some agreement and eventually cave in if you write a load of emails to Parliament or you complain a bit. But the police decided, obviously, and this is the sinister element to it, there's obviously a powerful Zionist lobby inside the police force, at the top of the Home Office, even stronger apparently now than under Priti Patel. When she was screaming, these are hate marches taking place in London every week, still the police carried on permitting the hate marches. And the newspapers were going, how can you allow the hate march? How can you allow the hate march? But under Keir Starmer, something has changed. And even though they don't make their direct comments about this, in actual fact, and this is what we know from the Jeremy Corbyn saga, when they tried to remove Jeremy Corbyn week in, day in, day out in his time in office, under the auspices that he's an anti-Semite, because once he turned around and said, our friends in Hamas, at a meeting, or was it John McDonnell? One of them said something like that, and he attended some sort of funeral. Then they turn around and say, oh, he's an anti-Semite. And of course, unfortunately, John McDonnell and Jeremy Corbyn capitulated on one thing after another, and this led these people to become more and more offensive inside the Labour Party. But the Labour Party is controlled, at least significantly, and on these external questions, by the Zionist lobby. Labour Friends of Israel, sorry. Jewish Voice for Labour is not a bad one. Jewish Voice for Labour is a good one. They march on the demonstrations. And actually many people have been arrested. Many people, many of those arrested have been Jewish activists. That's the thing, they target them. They were the ones targeted in the Labour Party, and they're the ones being targeted now. I think there's one called Yale.
It's the biggest purging of Jews in the history of the Labour, or in history of
There's a woman, I believe her name is Yale. I met her at a meeting some weeks ago, and I've seen her around on various demonstrations. She keeps being arrested. She was arrested a couple of days ago, arrested about a week ago. They just keep going around and arrest. And she's Jewish, a Jewish activist, fighting against Zionism.
The Jews are the stalwart defenders against
that's
the
right, that's what,
Israeli
because
state.
you see, amongst the Jews, there have always been divisions between pro-establishment figures and anti-establishment figures. And you know, there's that film I sent you ages ago. These people made a film about Karl Marx and Israel and the Jews and that sort of thing, in which I feature, in which. You know, there are many people in Israel, Jewish people in Israel, certainly before October the 7th, many who were opposed to the Israeli state or in favour of democracy for the Palestinians and the Jews, equal rights for the Palestinians and the Jews. And unfortunately, they lost out, or they've lost out since October the 7th in particular. They began to swing behind the Israeli state. But I think that's whittling away now. It's whittling away now. Yes.
So my understanding of the situation of Israel pre the October 7th, what do you call it, false flag, I'd say, is that the Netanyahu regime was on the teetering the brink, and this saved them. And it's like, you know, it's like any sort of charlatan government. Well, yeah, absolutely. And they just use the excuse of war to silence and destroy their critics, and that's exactly what happened here.
Have you all seen the BB Files? There's this film that's come out. You can find it on the internet, the BB Files, and it's a documentary explaining that Netanyahu requires the war. Needs the war to stay in power because he's facing corruption charges, multiple corruption charges, and he'll go to prison. And therefore, this idea that they've achieved a ceasefire and peace now, I think, is a misnomer. It's extremely unlikely that they will achieve peace. It's a temporary thing, in all probability, a temporary thing, while Donald Trump has a transition to make himself look good. But when Netanyahu feels threatened again, then he will launch a new offensive. And he said this morning that when he launches an offensive, it will be with the backing of America, the direct backing of America. And don't forget, Donald Trump said in the pressure he was putting on Netanyahu, he said, all hell will break loose if there isn't a ceasefire before I come in. So he needs a ceasefire now. But all hell will break loose, what does he mean? He doesn't mean that the Americans are going to bomb Israel. He means the Americans are going to bomb Gaza on behalf of Israel, as they've been supplying the weapons to the Israeli government all along. And this withdrawal, I mean, there's a parallel. I don't want to draw it too far, but there's a parallel with this madness in London of the last few days. They created this zone, basically from Portland Place, right down to Whitehall, where you're not allowed to go if you're pro-Palestinian. Because, as we pointed out earlier on, Piers here is not a supporter of Stop the War Coalition. He's not a supporter of the Palestine Solidarity Campaign in the actual organisation. And he didn't go to the demonstration that they were holding. He went on his own to BBC. And they were going down to Whitehall. And therefore the charge, because on the Metropolitan Police website it said, you will be arrested if you're supporting those events and going to those events and entering this area, which is madness in and of itself. Of course, unfortunately, John Rees, the leader of the Stop the War coalition. I saw his video a little while ago, and he made some good points, but he's mistaken in what he said, because he said this is the first time that leaders of a demonstration have been arrested in Britain. Well, I seem to remember a couple of years ago, during the anti-lockdown protest, one person after another would be arrested. Even entering Hyde Park would be arrested. So you've got to put it in context what's been going on. Surveillance state apparatus, the Zionist lobby, control over the population, surveillance of the population. What's the problem now? What's the
Have
problem?
a little bit of coordination when you do protests, don't you? You can't just have all chaos on the streets, can you?
On the
On the contrary, you can.
We need
okay.
to have demonstrations
Of course.
that have spontaneity to them,
Well.
rather than just being orchestrated campaigns.
So let me just
Because
fly
otherwise, if you
something
want
at you then.
If you want to outstrip the police, there's no way of doing it if you agree a route with them and you behave the way they want.
Okay, so let's say that
Where we defeated the police was, and even in the anti-lockdown protest there was trouble with that,
Did it here?
but where we defeated them was here in Hyde Park.
we're leading the revolution.
Because in Hyde Park, well, we did succeed in defeating the police on 3 occasions in Hyde Park. And that's because when you come into Hyde Park, it's open terrain. And there's no difference between the protester and the non-protester. So they should have said, Stop the War Coalition should have said, we will gather in central London, anywhere between Kensington Gardens, where the Israeli embassy is, and the City of London. We will gather anywhere between that area and between Finchley and Brixton. Anyone who comes on the demonstration, come into that area. Hide your flags. Then, at a certain message point, which you can either check on a website or get through a Telegram message or a WhatsApp message, then we all protest. Inside the underground, on the buses, in the tubes, on the street, inside the shops, in Marks and Spencer's, in Sainsbury's, at Palantir headquarters, the headquarters of the Secret Service operation internationally to murder Palestinians, in Pret a Manger, in McDonald's, all around the city, not on one demo going which you've agreed with the police. That idea has totally and absolutely failed. You cannot make an agreement with the police that you can trust. Therefore, you must be prepared to break their regulations and to orchestrate anarchic and chaotic as well as coordinated campaigns that break their ability to exercise police control over the demonstration. And that's the problem with the Palestine demos. After all, the rule that they imposed on this demonstration was you cannot go anywhere near a synagogue. Now, what if the Muslims were to turn around and say you cannot have a protest anywhere near a mosque? Or the Christians said you cannot have a protest anywhere near a church? There is nothing more ridiculous. No synagogues have been protested against in Britain during the whole course of the war against the people of Gaza. Tens of thousands of people have been murdered. Tens of thousands of children and women have been murdered. And that moron over there turns around and says Israel is defending itself. They say children are used as weapons against Israel to undermine. And Israel is so careful in not killing people, so careful in the way it operates, so careful not to harm people. Well, how comes the whole of Gaza is flat? Looks like Hiroshima. How comes you got 46,000 dead, 80,000 dead, according to the Lancet medical journal? This is a farce, what they're saying. A barbarous and murderous regime that must be destroyed. Yes, Israel must be destroyed. And it must be destroyed. Yes, Israel must be destroyed. And the people who live in Palestine, from the river to the sea, must have a democratic republic with equal rights between Jews and Palestinians. And the rulers of Israel and the entire Zionist lobby, if they're not happy with it, they can go back to Brooklyn. Because huge numbers of them come from America. There's 1 million have already left, gone to America, or gone to Russia, or gone to Eastern Europe. Huge numbers of the Israeli population, of the Jewish Israeli population, are immigrants immigrants from America, from Eastern Europe and elsewhere, given massive financial support when they arrived there. And for morons like Elon Musk or Donald Trump or Tommy Robinson and his fan club, stoking up the stories, stoking up these false stories about Muslim rape gangs. It's not Muslim rape gangs, it's rape gangs. And there are rape gangs in the Christian church. There are rape gangs in schools in England. We had paedophiles in my own school when I was at school. I know people in public school who were abused by their teachers. It was endemic in institutions in Britain. It's not specific either to Muslims or Pakistan, and it's got nothing to do with Muslims whatsoever. So when they say this thing about Muslims, what they're really trying to do is whip up the antagonism in British society based on trying to gain support for the Israeli barbarity carried out. So when Tommy Robinson and Co go on about immigrants coming in, what about the immigrants of the Jews going to Israel? What about them? Why aren't they a problem? In fact, he said himself, I would go to Israel and fight with the IDF. That's what Robinson said. So this idea. Yes. He said, go there and fight with a machine gun, shooting against the Palestinians. They want to create a culture war between the religions and the peoples around the world. We need to do the opposite. Mobilize the people collectively against the power of Israel and against the power of the Zionists and international capital connected with them. Thanks very much. Here's the man from prison. Come to give us a tale.